Hello and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam. Today I'm joined by Mr. Joe Roberts. Joe, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing good, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and we are here to preview the Italian Grand Prix. We are back at Monza. I think this is 3 races in consecutive weeks. So if we're going into the intense schedule, but do have a break after this race. But yeah, Italian Grand Prix, we're very much looking forward to it. But before we get into it, we're going to play Have I Got F1 News for You? And this time is actually pretty relevant to this weekend. And I've actually taken a tweet instead of a news article. And the tweet is blank drivers are currently expected to take grid drops in Monza. Could be more by the end of the weekend. And Joe, it's your opportunity to try and guess how many drivers do you think are definitely taking grid drops?
4.
No. I will give you 2 more guesses.
2.
No.
6.
Wrong again. It is 7 drivers are currently expected to take grid drops in Monza. Could be more by the end of the weekend, and a lot of people are expecting it to be more. So let me run you through the drivers confirmed for grid penalties. So we've got Lewis Hamilton. He's taking a power unit change, so is getting a penalty. Mick Schumacher is changing his gearbox, so getting a penalty. Valtteri Bottas is making a power unit change, and Yuki Tsunoda has got a 10-place grid drop after having 5 reprimands this season. And then we've got drivers expected to take penalties are Sergio Perez and Kevin Magnussen. So could be both Haas drivers taking penalties. So a lot.
Oh, do you know what the reprimand was?
Yes, it was the seatbelt, because he untightened his seatbelt. And in Holland, they reprimanded him for that. So 10-place grid drop, but because of the penalties, he still might not start at the back of the grid. But the question I want to ask you, in the light of these drivers taking grid penalties and more expected over the weekend or as we get closer, do you think that F1 needs to make the rules around car part allowance more lenient, as at the moment we are seeing so many grid penalties for using up their power units and gearbox?
Yes. In terms of, I would say 1 more engine, because I think it's 2. I think a couple of years ago it was 3. So I would add an extra engine and then an extra gearbox, and basically every other component I would add an extra 1. But I think it would need to be thought out, because obviously you don't want the big teams spamming out engines left, right, and center on the tracks that require high engine revs on them.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I think 1 more to 1 extra engine, 1 extra gearbox would make sense. But on the other hand to that, you will get these races where you have these really quick cars at the back of the grid and you have loads of overtaking. And a lot of the time, because of these grid drops, it can make the race a lot more exciting, because you actually are seeing overtaking, even if it is just fast cars against slow cars. At least you're seeing some action on track. So there's 2 sides to it, but I think I'm leaning towards that they do need to add another one. They're very harsh on it. I think they need to be more lenient. But let's move on to talking about the track. And this weekend, they're racing around the Autodromo Nazionale Monza. And this is a 5.793 kilometer circuit with 2 DRS zones, 11 corners, and 53 laps. Joe, what's your thoughts on the track?
I really like it. For me, last year was a bit of a DRS train. You can't really overtake. So that's one negative about it. But for me, it's the quickest track on the calendar. High speeds, got one of the tradition with the old banking. Obviously, they don't race around that, but that was interesting when Sky a couple of years ago went along that. And overall, there's famous corners, difficult corners, and yeah, it's just speed in
Mm.
general. And it's brought out some very good races in the past. For example, 2008 with Vettel in the wet, and in that Toro Rosso, I think it was like in that season, I think it was like the 8th or 7th best car. So he did really well that season. And overall, it's one of those, I think, tracks that are generally very entertaining to watch, and also a lot of demand on the cars as well, in terms because of a lot of brake failures along this track. So you get some crashes as well, which cause some drama. And obviously, I think you'll ask me about what happened last year, but obviously the Hamilton and Verstappen incident kind of brought this track, I think, back as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. Saying it is fast potentially could be an understatement. In fact, Formula One's fastest ever lap was set at Monza with Williams driver Juan Pablo Montoya 260.6 kilometers an hour effort during practice for the 2004 Grand Prix. And the cars are just pushed to their limits here. They're on full throttle for 80% of the lap. And then the other 20%, you are just slamming on the brakes for a couple of tight chicanes. So it tests the driver in many aspects in terms of getting the most out of their car on the straights, but also being able to slow it down in time for these tight chicanes. And last year's race was, as you said, an example of how exciting this track can be. It is a good track. It's a track that's iconic, but retains its good racing, unlike some others on the grid. So, yeah, I think it's a fantastic track, and hopefully we should have a good race this weekend. But we've mentioned it already. Let's look at last year's race at Monza. So it was a sprint weekend last year, which it won't be this weekend. So in qualifying, it was pretty uneventful. Bottas put his car on pole. Lewis Hamilton was second and Verstappen was third. In the sprint race, Gasly flew into a wall after contact with Ricciardo, causing a safety car, with that being the main incident there. And it finished with Bottas in first, Verstappen in second, and Ricciardo in third, with Hamilton dropping a few places. Bottas then started from the back of the grid for Sunday because he changed his power unit. And, well, the less memorable incident happened with Antonio Giovinazzi on lap 1. He made contact with Sainz and went into the wall. And unlike many of the collisions, he was the actual one who got penalised at turn 5. He got a 5-second penalty for unsafely rejoining the track. I just remember him coming into Sainz, watching Sainz's onboard, and he just comes across him, and it just left Sainz nowhere to go. On lap 26 was the iconic moment where Hamilton was coming out of the pits, Verstappen down the straight, and Max's car ended up on top of Lewis's car, which caused a safety car. It caused Twitter to go crazy. There were numerous incidents last year between Hamilton and Verstappen, which were big talking points, but the FIA decided in the end to award Max a 5-place grid drop for Sochi, which I think in the end was the right outcome. Do you agree with that, Joe? I mean, I think we talked about it on the pod last year. 5-place grid drop. Do you think that was fair?
Yeah, as if I remember what I can remember, I with these grid drops, I also don't think you should be able to take an engine penalty. I remember last year Max taking an engine penalty, and that was quite cheeky, basically. But that's just my opinion. I don't think you should be able to do that. But obviously, this last year's race, yes, it was definitely a penalty.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And then, of course, we had the iconic podium with Daniel Ricciardo winning the race, how times have changed. Lando Norris in second and Sergio Perez in third. Joe, what is a memory you have from the last race that you want to talk about?
I would say the McLaren's 1-2. I think it was a long time, not a long time coming, but a very long time that a McLaren has been on the top step, and also 1-2. I think it was 10 years. I think 2012, from my memory, was the consistent time when McLarens were 1 and 2, or in the shout for a podium. But again, it goes back down to the fact that weekend Daniel got the most out of the car and was be able to win a race. And same as Norris, if there wasn't team orders, I think Norris would have had a go at Daniel Ricciardo, but didn't want the same instant of Lewis and Verstappen. So I think for me that is the main talking point. But as you said again, it's kind of it kind of, yeah, at the end of the day, it didn't really save Daniel Ricciardo from losing his seat, obviously this season. So yeah, that's my main talking point for last season's race.
Yeah, it certainly was a memorable one, and it might end up being the final. I mean, it will almost certainly be the final race win of Daniel Ricciardo's career, and it was such a special one, and it is such a shame what's happened to him since. But yeah, it was a great day for McLaren, and team orders on Norris was good, especially after, as you said, what happened to Hamilton and Verstappen. There was no need to risk not getting maximum points. The memory I'm going for is bizarre, but it's because more I want to bring up a point about this weekend rather than last weekend. And that was Nicholas Latifi coming 11th in the race. And right, you may laugh, whatever, but it was one of his best performances last year at Monza. He had a very good race, 11th place, just missing out on points. And while it wasn't necessarily very memorable for most people, I'm bringing it up because the Williams car is very suited to this track this year. And their straight line speed is going to be such an asset this weekend. So I feel like, I have a sneaky feeling that he might go one better and get a point in Monza this weekend. It's a really hot take, but with their straight line speed, with Latifi doing well at this track last year, I have a sneaky feeling about it. With people taking grid penalties as well, it could fall into his hands nicely. It'll probably come back to bite me saying that, where it will be Saturday and he'll crash in qualifying and have to take an engine penalty for Sunday or something. But I'm gonna back it. That's my memory from last year, and I'm bringing it up because I think Nicholas Latifi, this could be his time for a point. I think this is his best opportunity of the season. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that is my memory of the last race. Let's move on to predictions now. It's always interesting to see how we're doing in the predictions table. So we're going to start with that. And of course, these are all done on averages. So after Holland, we've got a new leader, and that is Mr. Josh Bacon. He has gone up to an average of 3 points after getting 4 points for his predictions in Holland. We have Matt dropping down to second place on 2.9 points. So it's really tight at the top. In third is me on 2.7 points. Joe, you're fourth. You got 4 points in Holland and have gone up 0.3 on your average to 2.1. So it's getting quite close. Top four within 0.9, and then we've got Robert fifth, 0.5 points. But let's now tell you all what we're going to predict. So we always predict the podium last, but first of all, we have 5 stabs in the dark, effectively, at these categories. So first accident and the lap it happened. First safety car, VSC or red flag and the lap it happened. First pit stop, the lap. First blue flag, the lap. And the person with the most overtakes and how many overtakes you think they will get. So I'm going to go up first. And first accident, I am going for Valtteri Bottas, lap 1. And the reason I'm going for Bottas is that he's on a bit of a stinky run at the moment, and that's not all due to him. A lot of it is due to his car being rubbish, but he's 6 races without points. He's set to take a grid penalty this weekend. He'll probably be caught up in some madness at the back of the grid. So for me, Valtteri Bottas, lap 1, first accident. For first safety car VSC or red flag, I've gone for Daniel Ricciardo on lap 1. How times have changed. The reason I've gone for him is that the last 2 winners of Monza have DNF'd in their next race. And I have a feeling that with his lack of pace and him becoming almost a magnet towards the back of the grid, he might get involved in something and he could end up DNFing. For first pit stop, this is just a stab in the dark. Pierre Gasly, lap 1. Again, AlphaTauri, not been great, could be near the back. Even though Gasly has won a race here, still could be pitting first and damage lap 1. First blue flag, I've gone for Mick Schumacher because I've already backed Latifi, so I can't now say he's going to be the first lap. And the person I've gone for is, as I said, Mick Schumacher, lap 28. It was going to be one of the Haas or it was going to be one of the Astons. And in the end, I chose Schumacher as he's taking a grid penalty anyway. And then for most overtakes, supposedly taking a grid penalty. So I'm going for Sergio Perez with 8. That's my 5 predictions. Joe, what have you gone for?
I'm going to go for Ocon, lap 1. Just no context to that. I just think this might be an incident because of being midfield. Safety car, I think it's going to be caused by Guan Yu Zhou. Just because there's an addition of Alfa Romeos crashing out around here. Then going to go for Schumacher to pit. Lap 1. These are all lap 1s, by the way. And then Latifi to be lapped, lap 33. I'm not too optimistic about Latifi as you are, Sam, as in I think you're too, yeah. Then I'm going to go for Hamilton because he's going to start right at the back. Lap is going to start P20. So I think he'll get more positions than Perez in terms of overtaking. I predicted 8 as well. And
some interesting predictions there. We've got quite a few differentials, so we'll have to see who's right at the end of the weekend. And finally, let's predict the podium. And of course, I've read out quite a few people who are taking grid penalties, and there are some that we could predict that might take grid penalties. So it's definitely a tough one, but I'll go first. I think that the winner, I'm going to go for a bit of a hot take and say that Max Verstappen will win. He's this underrated young driver coming up through the ranks, and he's showing real promise. But on a real, he's just been dominant. Even if he takes a grid penalty, he'll probably still win. So for me, he's first place. Second place, I've gone for Charles Leclerc. He is probably better than Sainz, and so he's the one I'm putting in as my Ferrari contingent if Ferrari don't mess it up, though they seem to be messing up Sainz more at the moment, especially in Holland, than Leclerc. Then third, I've gone for George Russell, but that very much could be second. I'm really not sure between those 2 positions, but George Russell, he's looking great. He's super consistent. And if he doesn't take a grid penalty, I think he'll get on the podium. Joe, what have you gone for?
It's quite annoying. I've gone for exactly your predictions. I've gone Max, then Leclerc, then Russell. I just generally think if their teammates gonna, take penalties or go to the back of the grid, I don't think any of them will have the pace just because of the Alpines being very, very quick on the straights. And obviously you got Albon being ridiculous. So could be big points for Alpine and Williams in terms of Albon, and also maybe the McLarens and Norris. But I generally think Max and Leclerc and Russell will be way ahead before Hamilton and Perez and Sainz could catch up to them.
There we go. Great minds think alike after having differentials in the 5 kind of random wacky ones. Gone exactly the same with our podium predictions. But that wraps up our preview of the Italian Grand Prix. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, comment your predictions down below. If you want to stay up to date with what is happening at the Scenario 7 podcast, our links are in our bio. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.